What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Smart Money Academy, and today we're going to be talking about the inverse fair value gap. So, to get straight into it, what's an inverse fair value gap? I had it drawn out right here. So, we have our three candles here forming the fair value gap, right? Right here. Right here's our fair value gap. And then we have a candle negating the fair value gap, which creates the inverse. The inverse fair value gap is not this fair value gap. It's only the portion of the fair value gap that was invalidated. So it's only this portion here, okay? With that being said, it could also happen like a few candles later. It doesn't have to be the candle right after. I think that's important to point out because sometimes, who knows, right? And yeah, so the inverse fair value gap to me is meant to be used as confluence towards your drawn liquidity, and more often than not, it's more of an entry signal. Okay, so what I mean by that is that let's say my drawn liquidity is higher up here, but I'm waiting for price to it does this, and then price does this here, then price does this, and then it does this. Okay, for the draw, this is what we're looking for. So the bearish fair value gap created here is going to give an inverse, okay? Once the drawn liquidity, or once we get our market structure shift and displacement over here after the liquidity sweep to go get our drawn liquidity, and then we can enter on the inverse fair value gap because it confirms our bias and it confirms that we are indeed pushing towards that drawn liquidity and that we have momentum and that we're going pretty much. Like it's not some slow action. When we get inverse fair value gaps, it's serious business, okay? So what creates a good inverse fair value gap is when you have that kind of power of three going on, where it's more like you have your normal action and then you have your liquidity sweep, like this, and then market structure shift, break a structure, and whatever, and then you to go higher, right? And then right here again is going to create that, let's say it makes a fair value gap here, right? Once it breaks it, you guys can enter the trade to target your drawn liquidity because you're now confident. I use inverses on lower time frames, me personally. That's how I use them. So let's say I start off my analysis on the 15 minute, right? And I'm looking, whatever, right? And we have this big bearish move here. The only reason why you would ever think market is going to be bullish after this is if it breaks, and right here. So this here would be an inverse fair value gap that could be revisited at some point, okay? But this is on the 15 minute, right? If you look here, we had a 5 minute, where'd my chart go? We had a, let's say, right, I didn't trade this yesterday, which was Friday, so I don't know actually, but right here, we have a big 5 minute inverse, or 5 minute bearish fair value gap here, right? That kind of tells us we might want to go lower, but then it ends up breaking and it ends up acting as kind of like support to go higher, right? So once this break, if your draw was here, then you're really confident after this liquidity sweep here and this inversing that we want to go higher, right? Once we break above it, which is I wouldn't count this here as breaking above it. Let me mark it out for you guys. This is a little weak. This right here would be where I would consider entering on the retest of it, putting stop below and targeting the previous high, which gives us a 1 to 2.4, right? And the low is actually here. So it's actually 1 to 2.58, which is pretty good trade. So this is how I personally like to use inverse fair value gap. It just provides more confluence that market wants to go towards your draw liquidity, and usually it lines up pretty well with like a break of structure or market structure shift, and all that good stuff, okay? It's actually pretty prime to use in New York Open. Like the first 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes in New York Open is they're usually pretty consistent with it. Like the best example I could give off the top of my head is right here. You have this big bearish move down, and then right after it breaks, and then look, there's not a single candle that closes below it. And again, wicks do the damage, candles, or yeah, wicks do the damage, bodies tell the story. Not one candle is closing below this inverse fair value gap right here. because we have our bearish fair value gap that breaks to the upside, return to it, respects it, goes higher, goes back to it again, respect, goes back higher. Like there's actually not a better example than this one that I could have given for that. So the inverse fair value gap, to like go back on it again, is what is it? It's a fair value gap that gets invalidated, and the invalidation is in favor of your draw. So the fair value gap that was initially created is not in favor of your draw. So if your draw is higher like this, and you get a bearish fair value gap, like oh, and you get a bearish fair value gap like this is not in favor of your draw, but this one is here, right? So this example is kind of bad, but you get what I mean. So it creates, let's say, a fair value gap here, get your retrace to it, and then you can target your take a long to target your initial drawn liquidity. So it provides that further confirmation that market wants to go where you want it to go. So on that note, guys, I think that's pretty much it for inverse fair value gap. They're really good to use in premium discount zones using that OTE that I always preach, that EQ. An SMT is even better if you can have that, but all in all, just the inverse fair value gap on like a 1 minute time frame or a 5 minute time frame is a really solid entry signal to enter your trade once the candle close with displacement always. On that note, guys, have a good one. I got you guys in the next one.